Hello, welcome to video, and it's time for me to talk about all the books that I read in December. So welcome to the final wrap-up of 2023. Wow, the year's over, pretty wild. So I think just the best way to do this is just to go through them in order. And yeah, I mean, we're wrapping it up, we're closing out the year, and we're gonna start with Pathogenesis by Jonathan Kennedy. So this is actually the only book published in 2023 that I read in 2023. So that's kind of a fun fact. It was fine. Okay, so it's supposed to be, according to the subtitle, about 8 plagues that changed history. I was expecting the focus to be on 8 specific plagues, but it was really more about 8 periods of history, and then he talked about disease within those periods of history. So like, it was interesting, but that's not really what I was expecting it to be based on the subtitle. Also, the first 2 sections were Neolithic and prehistoric, I think. So he was really talking about like, oh, the probably diseases that the humans and Neanderthals like swapped between them and stuff. And I mean, there's evidence for that apparently in DNA, but I don't know, I was kind of expecting it to be about actual plagues, because how are we supposed to know it's a plague unless people were writing down, we're having a plague? I don't know. So, took a little while for me to get into it because I didn't find those first few sections that interesting. But, you know, I mean, he had some interesting stuff to say about, like, industrialization and how that actually decreased people's, like, qualities of life for a while, because you had more, well, mainly because, like, you had larger groups of people moving in cities and living together, and in these pretty nasty conditions, and the disease was just way more rampant. Until we kind of got a handle on that somewhat. We're still working on it. But it was an interesting book. It just wasn't as interesting as I wanted it to be, I guess, you know? So, and it was kind of a funny scenario because I almost never read books the year that they're published. So this one was even actually in the Goodreads Choice Awards, but I didn't vote for it because I hadn't finished it yet by the time voting was complete. So I probably wouldn't have voted for it anyway, because I always feel like I can't vote, because I would feel like I need to vote in a category only if I've read at least 2 books in that category, and I literally never have. And also, maybe I'd vote for a single book in a category if I absolutely adored it, but again, that's never happened because I almost never read books the year that they're published. And then, even then, I have a kind of a tendency to read stuff that isn't just the big things that Goodreads gets really into. Although nonfiction, I found, it's a good place to look for recommendations for me, because I don't know, I just feel like the general user base of Goodreads has different taste in books than me. But if you drill down to nonfiction, especially historical, because I don't really read like self-help, I don't really read memoirs, but if you're talking about like nonfiction books about history or science, that's where I can get some good recommendations, because I think it's kind of a smaller number of people who are reading that stuff. I don't know. And I think it fits better in what I actually like, so. There are several more books that were nominated this past year that I really want to read for nonfiction, but we'll get there eventually. But yeah, Pathogenesis was okay. Then I read Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This was great. I liked Kaikeyi a lot. So it's a retelling of, I believe it's called the Ramayana, from the perspective of a character in it, the stepmother, sort of Rama, who is Kaikeyi. but it's her life story, and it's interesting because I've never read the Ramayana. I have like, I guess I have an idea of what it's about now, but because the book is from, you know, Kaikeyi's perspective and it's her life, it starts, of course, before Rama's even born and all that, and she's telling it like, you know, from the future, and she kind of like sprinkles in little ominous things in there, and you're like, oh God, okay, so it's all gonna go terribly wrong. Although it was less sad than I thought it would be, because my impression, given what I'd read about it, was that she was sort of a villain, and so I was like thinking that she was going to do worse things, but it's more just that she and Rama are like, have different goals, and also he's crazy, kind of. I don't know. She was great. I liked her a lot. Also, it was honestly some nice like Aro Ace representation on a kind of unexpectedly. Like, I knew going in before reading the book that was the case because I'd heard it from a couple different places. Obviously, it's set like 2,000 years ago, so nobody is using that language, but that was still cool, and I appreciate that Vaishnavi Patel put that in there. Like, I assume, why would that be in the original story? I don't know. I'm sure since the original story is not from Kaikeyi's perspective, Patel is probably kind of telling the story in a way that gives Kaikeyi more credit than the original probably does. But whatever, it was really good. Also, Patel, it turns out she's from the Chicago area, so that was kind of cool just to read. It's like, where are you? So are you gonna write another book? Because I thought it was great. Maybe she will. So yeah, it was fantasy, I would say. We had the general genre of it. She definitely had like some kind of magic powers. Also, the gods are real. Also, the gods are dicks. I liked it a lot. Recommend. Also, it's a gorgeous cover. I don't know if it has another one that I haven't seen, but the one I have seen, it's orange and it's got the image of Kaikeyi on it. You know, she's got all this jewelry and stuff. And the copy I had some kind of like gold foiling or something like on her jewelry, so it was a little shiny. Very cool. Okay. Then I read Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. This one I liked a lot too. So this was kind of random because I've heard of this book. I never had that much interest in it, but I was doing Books and Lala's Buzzwordathon this year, and I was trying to hit all the categories, and finding a book with magic in the title is weirdly difficult because I read fantasy, but most of it doesn't have magic in the title. Like, that's way too on the nose. So I was just looking for one, and this is something that came up, and I was like, okay, I've read a Sarah Gailey before, I'll probably like it. So Magic for Liars is about this woman who is a private eye and kind of a disaster, and her sister went to magic school when they were teenagers, and she's always been kind of like bitter about it because she's not magic. But she gets hired to investigate a death at this magic school where her sister is working. Although it's not the one she attended, which I was a little bit confused by for probably too much of the book. I was like, oh wait, she didn't, oh, she went to a different one, okay. Because main character spent a lot of time at this school being like, imagining what was it like as a student here, even though her sister was not a student there, so I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, that's a minor complaint. That's really just a me problem. It was good. It was good. I liked, there was sort of this little like messed up little romance that was happening. I say messed up because it involved a lot of lying. The main character was kind of a disaster, and we love a disaster private eye. And there was some really interesting stuff with like the limitations of magic and with using magic for like medical purposes, which was pretty creepy and gross. And I liked that. So I'm not usually a magic school kind of person, but this is different enough. It's not about the really about like students going there or anything. It's about this murder investigation. So, or perhaps an accidental death investigation. That part's unclear. She's trying to actually figure out whether this person was murdered, even though it, well, anyway, very gruesome. Yeah, so I liked it. There was a lot of wild stuff. Then I read Salvaged by Madeline Rowe. This was kind of random. I was just like, oh, I need another book. And I had seen Salvaged back when it was new, which was 2019, so not that long ago, but I saw it like at my home library. It's got this gorgeous cover of like in space, and it's like this woman who appears to sort of be floating in space. I don't know, it was just very striking. And that's what's kept it in my head these years. So I finally decided to read it. And it was fine. It was a decent book. It was kind of oddly similar to Dead Space that I read in November. Obviously the plot's different, but both are books about like a woman who is working a menial kind of gross job in space, even though she is way like overqualified for it. And it's sort of horror and it's kind of gross. Especially this one. Salvaged is basically like this woman has this shitty job in space where she's basically like a custodian in the sense that if a ship has an accident, the crew dies, she's sent in to clean it up. So, you know, basically the worst job ever. And the whole reason she's doing it is because she used to work for this like bioengineering or something company that belongs to her family. But then there was this fucked up incident with her. I guess they were dating? Okay, a little unclear to me. Whether she was dating this guy or just co-workers. But I mean, they were co-workers, but I think she might have also been dating him. Anyway, he was garbage. But then they couldn't just straight up fire him because of complicated reasons. So she left and is now cleaning up dead bodies. Except then she gets sent to a ship where some sort of strange fungus is taking over the crew. And it's bad and it's creepy, and I saw elements of it, like I was like, okay, yeah, this is connected to blah blah blah, and it took like way longer for her to figure it out because she didn't have access to all the knowledge the audience does. But like, so there were parts of it that I was like, this is good, this is working really well, and then there were some parts where I was like, okay, sure. But overall I think it was a good book, and it's just fun to read like random standalone sci-fi sometimes, and I like a sci-fi horror. And it was gross. And I liked the characters. Overall, it was a good book. Okay, we're winding down to the last two. So the penultimate book of the year, What Stands in a Storm by Kim Cross. This book. Okay, so again, buzzwordathon, right? This was the final thing. I needed a book that had some sort of weather phenomenon in the title. And storm is a good one. So I looked up storm, just like I was on Libby looking for stuff. And this one came up and I thought that could be interesting. So it is a nonfiction about this massive like storm with a bunch of tornadoes, that's the relevant part, that went through mostly Alabama in 2011. I don't remember this. Of course, I don't live in Alabama, but I still think like, why don't I remember this? At the end of the book, they even mentioned the Joplin tornado, and I'm like, I remember that. Why don't I remember this other thing? So that's kind of weird, but yeah, like 300 something people died. So it's kind of like less of an interesting book than I would have expected based on what it's about, though. You know, you're just kind of following these people as the storm heats up, and as they're all kind of waiting to see where all these tornadoes are going to go, and then as they're cleaning up afterwards, and some people die, and it's pretty sad, but like for some reason it just kept vaguely irritating me, or I kept finding it kind of boring. Obviously parts of it were sad, but I'm like, it's not because the book is putting in some sort of extra effort. It's just because it's inherently sad. So I'm like, I don't think you really get points for that. So it was just kind of fine. I didn't really like it that much. But it had storm in the title. Okay, and finally, I think we're ending on a high note though. Foundation's Edge by Isaac Asimov. This is the fourth book, chronologically, publication order speaking, of the Foundation series. I read the first three, and I was not a huge fan of them. I don't really understand the appeal of Foundation as a whole, but this one was better. I did think Foundation's Edge was quite good. And maybe it was just like because a few decades have passed and Asimov's like kind of plotting has improved. I don't know. I'm actually like, to be clear, I am a big fan of Isaac Asimov. I have read, sorry, my hair is big. I have read loads of his books. I love him. I don't really like Foundation because I just don't really get it. I don't get it. Like, okay, reading the first book, I was like, okay, this is boring. And all the characters are just kind of arrogant. It got better though. The second book was better. The third book was better. And now I would say I did enjoy Foundation's End. I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was quite good, and it does make me want to read the next book. But yeah, I just don't get how Foundation as a whole is something that people become obsessed with. But whatever. I mean, it's not, whatever. Like, it's not my problem. People can like whatever they want, right? I just thought it would make more sense to me. Okay. But Foundation's End was good. This one is set, again, you know, a few hundred years have passed or whatever. The basic premise of Foundation is that, oh God, it's so complicated. Basically, there was this guy who figured out that you could predict the actions of humans on a large scale. So he predicts that the, like, galactic empire that they're all a part of will eventually fall apart. Great prediction there, like no shit. But he predicts that if they do certain things to tweak it, the period of time that's sort of chaotic between empires will be shorter. I think we're just accepting that a galactic empire is something we want, I guess. So there are people who are trying to follow his plan as time goes on. And so there's the Foundation, and there's also the second Foundation, which is secret and doing things with like brain powers. And at the end of the third novel, which was Second Foundation, it's confusing, they supposedly all died, but they didn't actually, it was an illusion. And in this book, a councilman, part of the first Foundation, says that he thinks the second Foundation is still out there. And this really annoys the mayor, who is sort of in charge of the Foundation, which is now not just one planet, it's kind of a little empire on its own. You know, and she's like, don't say that shit out loud. But then she tells him, go find them though. Except it's kind of more complicated, like she's not telling him everything, of course. And then like there's Second Foundation agents, and there's a whole planet, it turns out, where people have mind powers, but it's like this collective thing, and that's really interesting. And it's pretty wild. I liked it. Like I felt pretty good about it because, you know, you had a number of characters that each had really well-defined goals, and I was like, this is obviously very simple, but I like following that, you know, and being like, okay, well, is he going to achieve his goal? And are they going to find Earth? And are they going to find the Second Foundation? And like, they didn't find Earth, by the way, but the next book is called Foundation and Earth. So like, I have some thoughts about how maybe they'll find Earth in that one. Oh boy. And it was kind of wild. And also the one woman might have been a robot, unclear. Which is fun. Like, it kind of ties in to some of his other stuff. There's this little author's note at the end of the version I had anyway, where Asimov talks about how this ties into other books of his, which isn't essentially plot relevant. It's more just like, you know, Pebble in the Sky is set at the very, very early times of the Empire, or like the robot books are set even way before that, but this is still, like, they mention stuff in this book that's relevant to kind of like knowing how the galaxy was set up during the robot novels. Namely, that there were humans who traveled to other planets with robots and set up colonies, and then there were other humans that didn't like robots. Like, very basic, but that was cool. It also made me like, God, I should read an Asimov book that's not part of Foundation, because it's been a few years since I've done that. So hopefully I'll do that this coming year. But we'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's it. That was December. That was success. And I read the exact number of books this year as I needed to for my Goodreads reading challenge. I read exactly 70 books. So, winning at everything. And I'm looking forward to what 2024 brings. Bye.